On today's episode of the 1% Podcast, we are excited to welcome Ryan Okelberry. Ryan is a former founder and CEO of the House of Design Robotics company, headquartered here in the Treasure Valley. Ryan and his partners were able to grow and scale a robotics company and ultimately exit into a private equity. Ryan's background from being raised in a small town in Oakley, Idaho, to ultimately his success in business and in engineering. So Ryan's going to take us on his journey today. If you've ever been interested in starting a business, scaling a business, taking a skill set and being able to make that marketable, Ryan worked as an employee for a number of years before starting his own business and talking about that transition and building a team and the whole thing along the way of building a successful company. So we're excited to have Ryan on the podcast with us today.
So I'm sitting with this degree. I've done my engineering training certifications. I've got my professional engineering license, 4 years later, and I'm still sitting there like this is still a struggle. I'm not special, right? We just show up and be consistent and do the things that other people aren't willing to do. And I would just say one of my biggest motivators is I love it when somebody tells me I can't do something.
Ryan Okelberry, thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. Ryan and I have known of each other for a little while, but just kind of become friends over the past several months, and we get to coach football together and spend a lot of time around one another. And so I've grown to have a great respect for you and thought that just what I know of your story, this would be a compelling one to be able to share with people. So
Likewise to you too.
yeah, no, appreciate you being here. So one of the ways that I like to jump in and start every podcast is I like to just basically start at the beginning. Where were you born? Family circumstances, mom and dad, brothers, sisters, all that kind of stuff. What did your parents do for a living? And just kind of like what your early years were like growing up.
Yeah, so definitely come from small town Idaho. So born in Burley, Idaho, but family lived in Oakley, Idaho. So, I always joke that directions to my house included go to the pavement ends, just jokingly, but really small town. Mom and dad have one sibling, a younger sister by 2 years, so a really small family. But there in Oakley, my grandpa had a small little farm. Wasn't a big farmer by any means, but he made a living at it. And my parents, Idaho potatoes. So my parents were blue-collar workers, worked at the potato factory in Burley. So
Awesome.
That's kind of the background.
So both your parents worked in the factory. So growing up, sounds like you guys had pretty humble beginnings and upbringing. What did that look like, for you, and how do you feel like that kind of helped shape your view of the world and growing up?
Definitely didn't have a lot. I would always say, I've always answered that question, we had sufficient for our needs.
Yeah.
Is how I've always answered that. But knowing the situation, my dad always had me sit down and do the bank statement with him. So, when I was 14, 15, I knew how to balance the checkbook, and it wasn't mine. It was mom and dad's.
Yeah.
It registered to me that when I needed football shoes and basketball shoes, what that meant and what that took. So yeah, it's kind of a humbling experience, but I also respected them for what they did.
Well, and that taught you to understand money from a really young age, and same sort of thing. My mom didn't do it with their finances, but we would do it with ours. I remember my mom at like probably age 8 or 9 giving my brother and I a voided old checkbook, and anything that we wanted to buy, we would have to give my mom the money for it, and then we would exchange a check so that she could, basically, and then we'd have to log it in our ledger and then be able to balance, okay, what did we have? What are we saving for mission, tithing, other things like that, and then whatever our expenditures were. And looking back on, I kind of thought it was annoying at the time, but it's had a big impact on being able to view and understand money from a young age and understanding what that meant when I wanted to buy something.
Yeah, you understand the value of money pretty quickly when you realize what somebody else is doing to provide that for you. And then, being in a small town, we started working early. I mean, I remember having jobs for other people as early as 12.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask you. What were some of your first jobs you had growing up?
So, I mean, one job I remember, I'd go up the road. There was an older lady, had a huge garden, huge flower beds. She just couldn't manage it. And at 12, 13 years of age, like, I walked up the road and I mowed her grass and I pulled weeds for hours, but, she was very particular about how her flower beds look. So it kind of taught you some discipline as well as to, take pride in what somebody else values.
Yeah.
So that was one of the earliest ones. And then obviously there was I've moved hand lines in all shapes and forms. So plenty of hand line moving and just odds and stuff for my grandfather. I didn't necessarily get paid by my grandfather. It was more to help out the family. And
Yeah.
But feeding the livestock, feeding the pigs and cows, and splitting wood, hauling wood. Yeah.
So you're exposed to hard work at a young age. You're witnessing your parents both working really hard. You're getting exposed to the value of money and understanding what that takes to budget that, right? Like I just love like you kind of start putting all these dots together, and then eventually as you zoom out, right, it starts to make this picture. So when did you start really getting into sports and athletics? Was that something you did all growing up, or not really until that kind of became available in school?
No, I mean, it was early age. I mean, I'll give credit to some of our dads. They were, they were athletes in Oakley, and they kind of knew what it took to be successful. So, I mean, third grade, we were playing organized basketball. Fourth grade, we were playing organized flag football. So yeah, it was pretty early age. And then we just lived with a football in our hands and a basketball in our hands, from recess on.
Yeah.
That was just what we did.
So growing up through high school, so you play football and basketball in high school, kind of carried on like sports all the way through. That was a big part of your life, sounds like.
Yeah. So football all the way through, basketball all the way through, track. I was for 3 years. I was the only guy on our golf team. So I was a one-man golf team for a while until I convinced enough other guys to make a team.
Yeah.
We were terrible, but we had a team. And
yeah. Got to go play some golf in the process.
Yeah.
So after you graduated from high school, what did that look like? Did you kind of have an idea of what you wanted to do in life, or did you kind of plan on staying in the Oakley, Burley area, or did you intend like, hey, I'm getting out of here and I'm going to go to something else? And if so, did you have a clear view of what that was going to be?
That's a great question. I think there was a few experiences. My dad a couple times took me, to the factory. He worked the night shift, took me down there, and I think he made sure it was like on the coldest, darkest nights, right? And he kind of ran the palletizing area, shipping the product out. And he kind of told me, and it didn't necessarily register, but I think subliminally it did, that he's like, you're going to go to college. Nobody in our family had a college degree at that time, at least that I knew of. And so he's like, you need to do something more than I did. So I think subliminally, it was like, I'm going to go do something. I didn't quite know at the time. Other advice that I had been given, some of it through the church, I'd gotten some great advice that, find something that you like to do, because number one, you're probably going to be doing that for a long time. So
Yeah.
if you're going to do it for a long time, it needs to be something that you like to do. So figure out what you like to do, and then secondarily, figure out how you're going to make money at that, right? And so to make money at that, you got to be good. So, like the kind of keys are like to do something, be good at it, right? Then figure out how to make money at it. And then, you're into a career. So fortunately for me, I kind of made some good, if not lucky choices. I really liked to draw when I was a kid. So I had to beg the FFA teacher to get me a license of some drafting software that was, stuck on this old computer down in the library. So, while everybody else is at FFA, figuring out how to judge livestock, I'm actually, down in the library, trying to draw houses and stuff like that. So I kind of like to draw. So leaving high school, I did a kind of a non-traditional thing to do, is go to a technical or trade school. So I went and come to Boise, Idaho to ITT Tech and did computer-aided drafting and design. I liked it for two reasons. I was still considering serving an LDS mission, and I was able to complete that program in 18 months. And so being the youngest guy in my class and adding 18 months, it kind of timed out to like, well, I'll have something that I know I can do.
Yeah.
And then I'll be able to make a decision. Am I going, on a mission, or am I going to use this new skill that I've gained? Right?
Yeah. So what did that look like next?
So what that looked like next was, choosing the mission. So chose to serve, and I ended up going to the Philippines, the Naga Philippines, to be exact. Most people have probably seen some of the more perfect volcanoes, One of the more perfect volcanoes was in my mission in the center of the Philippines, and so lived by a smoking volcano for like
Wow.
18 months of the 22 that I was there.
Yeah.
Um, but sometimes things are just ironic. But my first mission president, happened to be a mechanical engineer,
Right.
and so just through those interviews and talking about what your future looks like, I knew that coming out of my drafting program, I thought that I was going to be an architect. And man, when I started doing the architectural drafting, I hated it. I despised it. And so I was like, man, maybe I picked something here that it's not going to work out. But I got into the mechanical drafting, and every part was different. It was made out of something different. It had a different fit, different tolerance. And so I just really enjoyed the difference of it every time. And so my instructor was like, you might want to consider, mechanical engineering. So I didn't necessarily investigate that at the time. So I went on my mission, but man, having my mission president be a mechanical engineer, we had some really interesting conversations for post-mission life. And
Isn't it interesting how those sorts of things happen?
crazy how that kind of stuff works.
I was just going to ask you, what were some of the experiences, or what do you feel like changed or benefited your life as a result of starting a mission? It sounds like at least one of those things was your relationship with your mission president.
One of those was a relationship with mission president, kind of having more of a solidified idea of what the next step after that's going to be professionally. I think for me, though, even having come from relatively humble existence in a small town, it was nothing compared to what I saw and experienced in a third world country.
Yeah.
So that was very hard for me to adapt to. And then it was very hard to witness some of the things that I witnessed and the difficulties that people go through. And I'm like, man, I've done nothing hard at this point compared to these people's lives. So it gave me some really in-depth perspective as to what to be grateful for.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that had big impact on your life moving forward, and I'm sure still does to this day. So you come back. Did you immediately decide that, hey, I want to become a mechanical engineer and go enroll at Boise State and go through the mechanical engineering program?
Yeah, there was some different schools that I'd hoped to be able to go to, Georgia Tech, Purdue, had great mechanical programs, done the research, but that's some hard tuition to pay for. So stayed with the in-state option.
Yeah.
Fortunately, when I got back, Boise State had actually turned it into a 4-year program, so I didn't have to do the first couple of years of Boise State and then transfer to the U of I. Was able to stay in Boise, where I'd already been for a couple of years before the mission.
Yeah.
So it kind of felt like home, and then from that point, Treasure Valley just became home.
Yeah. So you and your wife Monica meet somewhere along the line. I want to hear that introduced to it, because knowing what I know about her, and I'd love to have you share a little bit about her and her business, and you two kind of working hand in hand as you built this life and your career together. How did you two meet, and what did that look like?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. So her parents, her mother specifically, actually worked with my mom at the plant, and we knew of the family. They were kind of a family friend, but Monica and I never dated, never even considered dating. She went to Burley High School. I was out in Oakley. So we never dated before. But when I got back from the mission, she had just returned for the summer from her first year at the LDS Business College in Salt Lake. Okay. So both moms are kind of trying to play matchmaker.
Yeah.
We're like, you really ought to call Monica. And so, when you get back, you're still just kind of adjust and unwind especially from a third world country. And so it took a few months, but I ended up calling her, and she was my first date, and she was my last one.
I love it.
So yeah, I joke that she was very impressive in more ways than just being attracted to her. But when she came home from the summer, she was driving a 10-wheeler potato truck, and I don't know. I think my first impression was, here's a girl that values work.
Yeah.
And here's a girl that, is going to work beside me.
Yep.
And I really appreciated that part about her.
Well, and, if you don't mind sharing a little bit, the first time when I really got to know your wife, and she kind of explained to me a little bit about her running her own business for many, many years and working hard, right? Like that speaks volumes about someone.
Yeah, most people don't even realize, like, between the two of us, Monica was the first entrepreneur, right? She came up to Boise. We dated for about a year, got married, but she was working at the state capitol for the Secretary of State doing data entry. And then we got married, and we did the married life actually for 3-4 years. We wanted to really get to know each other, solidify our relationship before we, brought kids into it. I was also trying to go to school, so there
Yeah.
was just a lot going on, but we were very, very happy that we took that time with each other for those 3-4 years before we brought kids into the equation. But once that happened, you're like, man, you start looking at how do I raise a kid? We're both working,
Yeah.
and childcare downtown was more than what she made in a month. So it's like, that's the stupidest thing. Why don't we just raise our own kid, right? So we made some sacrifices. She made a lot of them, and she stayed at home, but she found ways to be able to still participate. And she just started cleaning houses, and then it grew to cleaning offices, and then it grew to her clientele was a lot that I was actually, doing that with her after hours. We were taking the kids to these offices that we were cleaning at night, like, so late night, hard work, just trying to make ends meet. But yeah, forever be grateful. She made a lot of things possible that just wasn't going to be possible until I could graduate and get a good job.
No, I love it. I love it. Love hearing that story. And again, as you look at these dots, as you're kind of painting this picture of, your story, it's like, obviously, like, those are big ones, and doing hard things. Like I tell people all the time, you need to have 2 jobs for the first 10 years of your career. One of those jobs can be going to school, but you need to have something else that you're doing, right? You need to have some other sort of side hustle, something where you're making money, where you're gaining a skill set. You need to be investing in 2 different things for the first 10 years of your career, whether that's school, whether it's, hey, your first job out of school, and then you are developing a skill set somewhere else. Maybe you have a job, you start a business on the side. Like, all those kinds of things are things that I advocate to people all the time, because if you're going to get ahead, you have to do, by nature of wanting to be the 1%, you have to be willing to do things that the other 99% of people aren't willing to do.
That's it. I mean, so, it took me 6 years to get a mechanical engineering degree because I was working full time.
Yeah.
Right. And Monica had, business going on the side. So it was a lot of dedication, a lot of long, hard hours, and then you start introducing kids into it. I remember doing calculus homework at 3:00 in the morning, holding my son, because I know my wife's got to get some sleep that night because she's getting up early to clean somebody's house.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's some days where you're just like, man, this had better be worth it. Right. And this had better be worth it.
No, I love that, because I can remember literally the exact same thing. I remember Cannon had just been born just before my last semester of school. I'm taking 21 credits my last semester of school, trying to graduate, being at home, bouncing him on this yoga ball thing, and trying to, like, get him to stop crying, because he was a very colicky baby, so he cried a lot, and bouncing him and sitting there trying to do multivariable calculus homework while I'm, sitting there bouncing a newborn baby. And so, yeah, no, those are tough days in a lot of ways, but at the same time, you look back and it's like, those things are the separator, right? Like, those are the things that separate you from everyone else, and wanting to be successful. It's not going to be easy. Like, I tell people all the time, like, you're going to have 2 jobs. You're going to have to do things that other people aren't willing to go do. And it's not going to be easy. Like, and success is not a linear path. It's going to go up and it's going to go down. It's going to go up and it's going to go down. You're going to think you're making progress, and you're going to think you're falling back. And you're going to go through these peaks and valleys. And there's going to be times where you're going to think, I can't do it one more day. And there's other times you're like, okay, hey, this is great. I love it. I'm enjoying myself. I like what I do. But, those times when you're feeling like, I can't do this another day, it's just one more step in front of the other, right? And consistency is really, in so many ways, the secret sauce. Like, can you just show up longer than other people can? Can you go walk this difficult journey, not just for a week, not just for a month, not just for a year? Like, can you go walk this hard path doing hard things every single day? Can you do that for 10 years? Can you do it for 15 years? Can you do it for 20 years? And you'll just separate yourself from virtually everyone else because most other people will drop out long before they get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there was even times where, you finally graduate. I was grateful for the tech school training because it kind of opened up job opportunities. But I was kind of working and learning how to be an engineer while I was, going to school, though, being able to use those skills. But, my first job was with a local company called Trust Joist, and they were a startup in Boise. If you ever go back and do the history on Trust Joist, it's kind of a cool startups story in the Boise area. They were later bought out by a company called Weyerhaeuser, but I did 11 years of mechanical engineering work for Trust Joist Weyerhaeuser, So I'm sitting with this degree. I've done my engineering training certifications. I've got my professional engineering license, 4 years later, and I'm still sitting there like this is still a struggle. I've done everything that everybody has told me. I was always involved, tried to do the best I could be in everything, and I've done all these hoops that society has told me to do, and I'm still barely making it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is so frustrating to me, right? I don't know how much harder I can work. I don't know what else I can actually do. And so I just started, looking around me at people that seem to be very successful, seem to be, living what I would call a more comfortable life than I was.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out, like, what do you do? And
what are they doing that I'm not
what are
doing?
you doing that I'm not doing? And sometimes it was just cold turkey. I just see somebody that, walked out of a nice house and be driving through a nice neighborhood, just cold turkey, just talk to those people.
Yeah.
Didn't know them from Adam, but I'm like, I need to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, how did you get this? Right. So what I kind of took out of that most of the time, almost 90% of the time, those people that I kind of engaged with trying to figure it out, they were all entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
They were all doing it for themselves. And so that kind of led me to my next thing. Like, okay, I've been an engineer here for 11, 12 years. I need to start thinking about how do I learn enough about engineering that I feel confident enough to go and do it on my own, right? So, I get into another couple jobs, still working for other people, but I have a different mindset as to what I'm trying to acquire and what I'm trying to learn. So there's doing the job, and then there's trying to take on extra information, extra networking, trying to kind of set yourself up for that jump. And I kind of thought that jump would be when I was a little more mature. Maybe I'm in my mid 40s. I probably got 20 years of experience under my belt and a good network. And well, that's not what was in the plan. So I had an opportunity to start a business with a couple of good partners, and in 2010. So I had just been at a startup company. There was a company called Transform Solar that was here local in Nampa. It was a startup between Micron and an Australian energy company, and they had a new way to try to make solar. But ended up at that company, and in the automation group, there was two other guys in that group that I'd kind of worked with before in other capacities. But we found ourselves together at this startup, and that startup, only lasted like 15 months. So the three of us are like, well, great, now what do we do, right? We're really good at what we do. We've been adding robotics to this process, whereas two of us were mechanical engineers and one of us was an electrical engineer. And we're like, well, maybe we should, maybe try to do this on our own.
Yeah.
Right? And so, think of the conversation, right? You just got laid off from this startup, and I'm going home. It's like, what do you tell your wife, with young kids? Well, babe, I'm out of work. You got no job. Well, the idea was to at least come with some kind of solution. So the solution was, don't worry, it'll be okay. We're going to start a business.
She's like,
hold on to your shorts here.
Is that a solution, or is that
Do you even know how to start a business?
Yeah.
And the answer was no. We had no clue, right? Just three guys who were engineers. We were good at what we did. We kind of thought we had an idea as to how we could kind of make that valuable for other people. And I'll say the first year or two, our original ideas of, introducing robotics and trying to make a training platform, right? Like, can we take robots to high schools and to colleges, and we'll build a curriculum and teach people how to use robots? And well, you find out really quick that those aren't the institutions that can afford
Yeah.
robotics.
Yeah.
And so you kind of pivot, and you're like, okay, how do we make this skill that we're good and passionate about? How do we make this sellable to other people? And so we started getting connected with robot suppliers, and we decided to become a system integrator, or somebody who, knows the equipment. So you're kind of selling the robots for them, but you're also, adding the full solution to the customer. Because honestly, most people don't realize that, a robot, a 6-axis arm robot's really just a paperweight until you value add to it. You've got to add the end effector, you got to add the software and programming. You end up having to build a system around it to take the inputs and the outputs, and you're truly building a full solution. A robot's just a tool, no different than a hammer.
Yeah.
In some ways. So kind of figured out how to be a system integrator with a robotic company. And the other piece I probably should add here is that we were at least smart enough to go to the SBDC, or the Small Business Development Center. It's kind of a program offered through the state and in affiliation with Boise State. And so we kind of started at this incubator, and that was honestly one of the best decisions we had made in, trying to start a business, is be in a spot where there's other entrepreneurs doing different things, but they all have an entrepreneurial spirit. But you also had access to people who'd been there, done that, who were mentoring the program and running that development arm. So just having those kinds of resources kind of made it easier for us to focus on what we wanted to do and kind of set us up for success. That was a really good decision on our part.
One of the things I see a lot with entrepreneurs is that you gain a skill, right? You gain some sort of a technical skill, whether that's being an attorney, being an accountant, being a realtor, being a football coach, being a trainer, being a mechanical engineer, whatever it is. There's the technical aspect, and then there's the business aspect. Yeah. And that is often a completely different skill set that people don't ever learn in school or in any sort of, formalized training. It's something that you learn as you're going, sure. Right? All of a sudden it's like, okay, well, now I got to learn how to be a boss. I got to learn how to manage our finances. I've got to learn how to hire people. I've got to learn how to set up offices and learn the dynamics of how people interact together, and working the business itself is often a bigger animal than just the technical aspect, right? Like, maybe the technical is bigger right at first, but as the business starts to scale and to grow, pretty soon the business component overtakes the technical component.
It does. After a while, you're like, man, I just want to design robots.
Yeah.
And I'm doing everything else but that, right? As the business is growing. But yeah, thank goodness for Google, right? I got my MBA through
That's right.
The School of Hard Knocks, and just, searching it out. You get into a situation, you're like, how do I handle this, right? And so, yeah, the engineering part was easy for us. It was the other stuff, and building a business and a customer base, and how do I support those clients? I mean, I remember our first really big client, the one that kind of tipped us over and got us going. At the time it was just 3 of us, and we're sitting across a big table. I remember, with their entire engineering staff, their plant manager, and they're asking questions, right? We're trying to propose a $1 million system to go into this medical device lab, and they're asking questions like, so who do we call when this is done, it's installed, and we need some support, right? And it's like, I look left and I look right at my 2 partners, and it's like, we hadn't even thought about it. So, yeah. Like, I just quickly piped up. I'm like, well, you call me, right? You call me for service. You can call him for this. And man, they had to have known that we were just, blowing wind, right? But they liked our idea, and obviously the price that we could do it at was better than our competitors, because we're only trying to support 3 people. So you kind of get those first projects that way. You're lean and mean, and you make them work.
Well, and I think that's an interesting and an important lesson for young entrepreneurs to learn, is that as you're starting out a business, the business isn't producing a lot of revenue. It's not producing a lot of profits right at the beginning, but it also doesn't require a lot to be fed, right? It starts out very small, very lean. And so you can go take on certain projects. You can take advantage of certain opportunities in the market, because you can go do things that larger companies can't, right? Just because they're priced out, because a business as it grows, I use this analogy all the time, it kind of becomes like a monster. And the more you feed it, the more it grows, the bigger the monster gets, and the bigger the monster's appetite is, right? It just has to be fed more and more all the time.
That's so true. I think in year 7 or 8, and the business was going, I got this meme from a friend, and it had this guy riding on the back of a lion, saddled up, looking probably a circus lion, right? But regardless, he's riding on the back of this lion, and underneath it says, "Not sure how I got on it, but pretty sure if I get off, it'll eat me."
Yeah.
Right. And that's how I felt about my business at some point, right? Because it's just it's a monster that needs to be fed. But early on, you can find that niche, right? And so we made our niche knowing that there were larger robotic integrators than us that could do larger systems, but they wouldn't look at a single robot type of application. So those were the ones we focused on. How can I get a single robot in a small little box working for somebody, right? And that was kind of our niche for a while.
Yeah. So you can go in, you can go do things that other people can't do because of your size, because of your ability to move quickly. I tell people all the time also that your ability to make decisions quickly or to answer questions quickly, be able to get customers taken care of quickly are advantages that you have, right? The larger a business gets, the more checks and balances they have, the more departments they have, the more people they have, the more people that don't really care they have. And so the business scales, and now all of a sudden someone sends a request and it's like, oh, well, you have to send that through, this service request thing. And then it goes this, someone's inbox and it sits there for a week, and then someone gets it. Oh, well, we'll transfer that on. And then someone else gets about it. And it's a month before they get taken care of. Whereas, hey, we're not very big. We don't have all the abilities that maybe a larger company has, but you can call us today and we'll have someone out there in 2 hours.
Be responsive. We answer the questions. We understand the problem. We can adjust our quote and adapt to what the new need is while somebody else is going through a 4 or 5 week, quote cycle.
Yep.
We're making a decision in 2 to 3 days. Like, hey, can you do this? Yeah, we can do that. And that'll just adjust this. And you're responsive. So people are like, yeah, I know you're small, but I'm signing up with you.
Yeah. The ability to be that dynamic and to be able to change and to be able to, respond quickly is a value that I think a lot of young entrepreneurs don't really understand that they have. They may look around and think, well, the world's dominated by big businesses, right? The world's dominated by all these huge companies that do whatever it is, right? Like you even look at, when we were younger, doctors primarily all worked out of their own clinics. You'd have a hospital somewhere where, some medical professionals would work, but a lot of doctors had their own clinics. You can go see them. It's almost non-existent anymore, right? Like businesses have been swallowed up and conglomerized to make things, bigger or whatever. But that ability that you have as a small company to be able to be dynamic and be able to shift and make decisions is a value that I think a lot of young entrepreneurs don't really understand that they have. And sometimes like that is your greatest ability that you can bring to the table.
Well, it just goes back to, things that I'd learned when I was younger, right? So, taught things like if you're going to start something, finish it, right? If you're going to do something, be the best you can be at it. So when you start a business and you're making a promise to somebody across the table, like, yeah, I can solve that problem. Like you're going to go to work and you're going to figure it out, right? And you're going to be the best at whatever that is that you can be. So those early relationships, and that's how you're behaving, like just becomes pretty solid.
So when you guys got started up, this is a question that we get asked a lot is how do people that start a business fund it, right? Like you can either go in and take on outside capital, you can try and raise funds, get a loan, bootstrap it. And a lot of businesses, I even say like you can start with virtually no money, right? Like there's a lot of businesses that you could start with even pre-selling services to people, using the money that you generate from pre-selling services and then go use that to go start your business. If you don't mind, how did you guys handle that? And what did that kind of look like for you guys, not only as you were starting, but then as you started to scale and grow your company?
I love the fact that you listed like 5 things, right? And I will be honest with you, like when we started, I don't think we knew 2 of them, right? So it's like, bootstrap, and we tried the loan thing, and nobody's given a new startup a new tax ID a loan.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Especially in 2010 or whatever year this was. Yeah.
yeah, it's like 2012.
Yeah.
It's just come out of that recession time. Like, yeah, that's not happening. So, I mean, it's one of the funner stories to tell. But um, the three of us all, after we're laid off from that startup company, we're like, well, we don't want to start this. How much money you got, right? And we all could come up with $3,000. Right? So we all tossed in $3,000 of initial capital investment. So with $9,000, we're like, we're going to start this thing, right? And I will just tell you that sometimes it is better to be lucky than good. So in that first couple years, we had some of the most fortuitous things happen. So that startup company that we were at closed down. They started to auction some of the stuff off. And so we got wind of it. And so we went back in for the auction, and we basically bought our entire engineering lab. Like, we walked out of there with a couple robots, some machine vision cameras, tools, things that we needed, right? For like a couple $1,000s, right? And then a few months later, one of my other business partners, a former company that he'd worked at in Boise, the boss had called him up and said, hey, I'm closing down my Boise office. Would you guys go in and clean it out? And we're like, oh, yeah, we'll go clean it out. I guess we'll just quote you some hours, probably take us a week to clean it out. We'll just quote you some time and we'll go clean it out. He's like, no, you don't understand. I want you to go in and clean it out. Take whatever you guys need, throw the rest in the garbage. And then a few months after that, the Weyerhaeuser facility that I had worked at for years was moving their stuff to Federal Way, Washington. And we did the same thing at an auction there. So within 18 months, we find ourselves with forklifts and air compressors and tools and robots. And we're like, man, we've got a business, right? And I'm telling you this, like, we didn't invest more than the $9,000.
Yeah.
Like, it was crazy what we came out of with that small little investment. And then from there, it was never capital injection or loans. What we did was, we're like, well, if we're doing these projects for people, it only makes sense that they give us some money to start. So we basically used other people's money to run our business. So it's like, here's our idea. Here's the quote. We're asking for 50% down to start. And because we were lean and mean, we were able to hold on to our margins and slowly grow that. And after every check we got, we put, 10% away, and we basically built our own line of credit,
Yeah.
if you will.
Yeah.
That's kind of how we got it going.
So I'm assuming that along the way, you guys needed to make capital investments into the business of buying new equipment or upgraded systems or different things that you would need. So you guys are projecting that into your quote for a certain project. You're putting that in knowing, okay, hey, we got to get at least this much money down in order to be able to buy what we're going to need in order to be able to complete this project.
That's it. And then the tougher projects that, were a little more questionable, we kind of came up with a process to kind of step a customer into it. We called them engineering studies. It's like, well, we kind of have some ideas how we might solve that. So rather than you go all the way in with the total price, how about we start with like, a $50,000 study, which allows us we'll go buy this key piece and that key piece. And if it pans out and it's successful, then we'll kind of move the project to the next phase. So we kind of just, even when somebody wasn't on the hook for a couple $100,000 or $500,000, we kind of found a way to kind of ease them into it and still use other people's money to get what we needed done.
So how did you guys come up with that process of doing things? I'm guessing, my buddy Tom Yelquist across the hall has a quote of saying that wisdom comes from bad experiences and bad experiences come from lack of wisdom, right? Mm-hmm. Often it's things going wrong or having, difficulties or hiccups on a project. And then you learn like, ooh, we're not going to do that again. So where did you guys come up with that idea? I'm guessing somewhere along the line, maybe something hadn't gone very well and you're like, hey, we need to structure it this way, or even come up with the idea of like engineering studies and phasing people into things and kind of mitigating your liability along the way.
Yeah, I think all of us had kind of, in our own way at previous jobs, had all those similar experiences. So it was interesting, even though we'd worked together for that short 15 months at Transform Solar Company, our combined experiences in R&D and trying to do other projects, I think we'd all seen where we'd failed before, right? So I'd say that another, mantra of mine was like, don't be afraid of failure, right? So I had always learned like fail fast, right? The faster I fail, the sooner I'm going to figure out what I did wrong, the sooner I can recover on making a fix, especially when you're in the environment of designing custom machinery. So I got an idea of it, probably going to take about the fourth or fifth one to actually refine it and make it work. So knowing that kind of process, we all kind of said, how do we de-risk this stuff? Don't take a lot of money necessarily up front from the customer. Let's risk manage this. Take a smaller amount, but we learn enough to be able to either decide that we have the confidence to finish the project, and so do they. So I think it was a conglomerate of all of our individual experiences of just being okay with failure.
Yeah.
Right. But finding a way to mitigate it.
Yeah. So as the company continued to grow, a lot of times with small businesses, the way that they become successful is that the owner, the founder, or the founders, the partners in the business are wearing 10 hats each, right? You don't have a whole staff of people. You don't have a marketing department, an accounting department, an HR department. Right? You don't have all these things, right? You don't have a sales department. You don't have a service department. It's like, you're it, right? Like, you are everything. And so you're wearing all these different hats. And so the business can be really profitable because you're doing something in people's jobs. It's not sustainable for a really, really long period of time. And it's not sustainable if you want to grow and scale your business. So as those things come up, eventually you got to start buying back your time, right? You've got to start putting people into place. And it's very interesting because being a successful entrepreneur, business owner requires you to be able to evolve as the business changes and grows. It takes one skill set to, in your case, do the engineering work necessary to be able to make the product or system work. It becomes another skill set to start running a small business. It becomes another skill set to start scaling that business. It becomes another skill set to go transform or exit, a business like that. So maybe talk about the steps that you saw, and as the business evolved, what were the things that you guys had to do to start not being the bottleneck in the business?
Yeah. So that definitely did happen. I think for myself, my other partners may have experienced this differently, but for myself, that SBDC part that I talked about, there was definitely people there that you could kind of go to and talk to. So, as I was learning, certain situations with customers or whatever, having somebody to go bounce that off of was invaluable to me. And there happened to be a gentleman out there that kind of ran that department while we were there. And I developed a really great relationship with him. So, mentors come in many shapes and forms.
Yep.
Sometimes, mentors can be somebody who's just difficult in your life and that you don't have anything in common with other than a difficult relationship. But mentors can be people that are just in the right spot and at the right time. So this gentleman, I started, buddying up with him. I started, going to him, and he's an older guy, he's got stories to tell, and this is his way of, trying to give back with all the years of experience that this guy had. So sometimes you had to listen to the story, but man, I tell you what, every time there was a gold nugget at the end of it. Right. And so some of the things that I picked up from him, was number one, don't be afraid to let go of control. Right. So yeah, I've got a dozen hats. My other partner's got a dozen hats. We're all kind of trying to divide certain things up amongst each other. But the advice he got was like, you be free to give that up. And it's okay to not be the smartest guy in the room. So when we did start hiring, I had a different perspective of, man, if I'm going to hire, I need to hire somebody that's better at this than me.
Yeah.
I need to hire somebody that's actually smarter at this than me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to be that guy, right? So let's just go get really good people and let's just remove the red tape and let's see how well they perform. So you start putting a network of good people around you and then empowering those people to, take your philosophy and then add to it.
Yeah.
Man, that was a recipe for success.
It's like a cheat code, right? Like
cheat code, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in so many ways, I've employed people that I look at them, I'm like, my gosh, that guy is so much better at this than I am. I just happen to be the guy who started it.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful they're working for me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think that you hit on a really important point of being willing to hire people that are smarter than you or that have a better skill set in a particular area than you do. As a successful business owner, entrepreneur, you have to be versed in a lot of different things, right? Like you have to be well versed enough technically to understand what your business is and what it does and how to improve it. You have to be the visionary. You have to be the one setting the culture and the direction and the mission and vision and values of the organization. You have to be the one that can go sell your product and service right in the beginning. And you have to be able to sell other people on wanting to come on board your company, right? And not to mention the other, 200 hats that you have to wear along the way. So it's like you have to do all these other things. Can you go find people that can go run your HR department way better than you ever could? That can go do the technical work way better than you ever could? They can go do marketing or development or whatever it is better than you can. And when people are willing to let go of that and to be willing to surround themselves with other smart people, because I've been there and it is exhausting to feel like you have to be the one that has to come up with every solution to every problem and to know that like there's no one else here and this either succeeds or fails with me. Some people get a high off that. I get exhausted by it, right? Like I don't want to be the only one trying to fix a problem. I want to have a team of smart people around that we're all working on the same problem together. And then we're going to come up with a better solution than I could ever do on my own.
It was a different mindset between the years that I'd spent as an employee, right, versus the years that I had gotten to at that point as an entrepreneur. Because as an employee, you're trying to kind of gather a kingdom of things that you're good at that bring value, make you valuable to the organization now that you can level up, you can advance in your pay. So you're kind of trying to bring all this and you're kind of trying to hold it to yourself. It was completely the opposite as an entrepreneur. I was basically working myself out of a job, right? Like that was the goal. Like, At the end of this, I should have nothing to do.
Yeah.
And going back to that mentor, he was one of many, but when we graduated the small little program, basically we outgrew the space and they needed us to leave.
Yeah.
That gentleman decided to come on board and continue to mentor us. And, I think that was a very proud moment for me because that gentleman's background is, he had been in the very high senior level, management of the factory that my parents had worked at as a kid.
Wow.
I'm trying not to be emotional, but when you get to call your mom and dad and you say, Mom, Dad, guess who works for me? Right? The guy that used to run your entire operation works for me, wanted to work for me. Like that was a very valuable relationship that I was able to have. And, kind of a defining moment, like, man, it's pretty cool. Somebody like that actually wants to work for me. So back to the getting people around you that are smarter and better than you are. That's a recipe to success.
Yep. 100%. Looking back over your career, if there's things, not that necessarily that you would change, but lessons that you wish you could have learned earlier on, are there any of those that really stick out to you that you say, you know what, had I just learned this one thing at a younger age, it could have propelled my success even faster?
I'd say that I, was humble and asked for help, but I think I was, there was a stubborn streak in me that, I literally had to beat my head against the wall for way too longer than I should have to actually go out and seek that help. So I think I should have been, if I could go back and be like, man, be humble sooner, be willing to ask the dumb questions sooner.
Ego is the enemy, right? Like, yeah,
it is, right? And even when I say, my philosophies fail fast, well, that wasn't always the case, man. You sit and you spend time on a design and you're the only one designing it. And then you put a bunch of money into it and you build it and the thing just absolutely, utterly fails. And you're just like, man, I must be the biggest idiot on the planet, exposing yourself to your peers, exposing yourself to, your customers, your clients, that, your thing doesn't work can be very, that's a hard lump to take.
Yeah.
When you take and flip that on the other side and you find the positivity out of that, the silver lining, if you will, of I'm better now because of that failure. Well, that's a different mindset to take. And it's like, okay, I'm okay to fail. And then trying to teach that philosophy to your employees. Like,
yeah.
I'm not gonna, I don't want you to feel bad about your failures. Just you found a way that it doesn't work, and that's more than we knew yesterday,
Yeah.
right? So
Use that as a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block.
even though I eventually got to those things, I think if I go back and if I could had turned up the learning curve, well, some of that faster would have been better.
Yeah. Let's talk about a few things relative. I told you our audience is primarily listeners like 18 to 30, 18 to 35. Question that we get a lot is asking about education. What should I study? Should I even go to college? Right? You have people like Elon Musk. Elon's very vocal. Is like, there's no reason to even go to college. There's no reason to have a college degree. Like, there's zero reason. There's a lot of opinions all across the board on that. I'm a major proponent of gaining skill sets. I believe that skill sets are valuable, degrees are not. And if your degree helps you to gain a skill set, great. That can be a engine in driving you the direction that you want to go. But I don't believe that getting a degree is necessarily a prerequisite in order to make someone successful. In fact, I would say that probably a majority of the most successful people I know are the people that learned it through the School of Hard Knocks. And if you do have a degree, you're going to go learn a lot of things through the School of Hard Knocks. I mean, I have a master's degree, and most of what I know, I did not learn in school. So I'm curious what your take is on education. What if someone's to come to you and ask, hey, Ryan, like, I'm 18, 19, 20 years old. I don't know what I want to study. I don't know what I want to do. What are your views on education? And what should I go do with my life?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, obviously, I've had plenty of people come and tour my business, and the kids come through, and I ask the kids, how many of you want to be an engineer? In the beginning of their little visit, they don't even know what an engineer is. Yeah. Nobody raises their hand. And then you walk them out and you show them some cool robots and stuff. And then I got the entire group, wants to be engineers. And sometimes you have some parents in the mix and they're asking the questions like that. Well, how do my kids go to college? And I'm like, I'm not going to say that that's necessarily required. I says, I started with a non-traditional, skill set first, and then saw the need or saw the how I could up that skill set with the engineering degree. Right. So it kind of predicated that I wanted more. It wasn't that I led with that college degree. So I'm a proponent of there's lots of ways to do it, and it can be a non-traditional format. Definitely goes back to, again, make sure you find something that you like to do because you're going to be doing it for a while. Right?
Yeah.
And so, bouncing back and forth, trying to find that, I think is also fine.
So you've had a lot of people work for you over the years. What are those patterns, behaviors, things that you've noticed in those that work for you that were the most successful, that were the highest outputters, and that were often the highest earners? If you could kind of define one or two or three things that you've noticed in those people, what are those patterns that you notice in the people that succeeded the most?
Definitely the hard work, right? Definitely hard work is a key to it. But I would say some of the best engineers that I've hired have always seemed to come from some kind of trade first, or had some kind of thing to do with their hands, right? So, all kinds of engineers are going to be needed. I did a stint where I actually taught at Boise State as an adjunct faculty for a few years, and I always kind of asked the group, like, why engineering and what's your background? And it was always about 50-50 that, somebody chose engineering because, they fixed the trucks and the motorcycles and the stuff, or they grew up on the farm fixing stuff. And then the other 50 was, well, I'm really good at math and I really enjoy science. And it doesn't mean that one side or the other is going to be a better engineer. I truly believe that a good team of engineers needs a mix of both. But, just having that hands-on, kind of outside approach, has been valuable. So, I mean, I remember, like I said, I went to the factory with my dad, and, he's trying to run equipment that other people had designed. And I remember him telling me when I got my engineering degree, he's like, you better not be the engineer that shows up at the factory thinking that you know everything with your shiny white hard hat and your clean shoes. Like, just listen to the people who actually run the equipment. Listen to the people whose processes you're trying to improve. Don't think, don't come in like you know it all. So when you have people that have kind of been somewhere and done something and kind of understand that there's maybe a little bit more that I need to figure out about this before I just come in with my fancy idea, like those people seem to be a little more successful in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I love it because you can see these patterns. We were talking a little bit before we got started off air about it's been a privilege for me to get to interview so many successful people and to get to see the patterns that are evident in their stories, right? Like, I mean, I could just paint this pattern right here with your story of, growing up while your parents are both working in a potato facility and seeing equipment running, seeing your parents both working hard, coming from relatively humble circumstances, learning how to work hard at a young age, being around equipment, being around things that need to be fixed or worked on, going and serving a mission, seeing people in a third world country, seeing that our problems are, very relative to theirs, drafting, going into engineering, you and Monica starting a business, running that, working that, going through school. Like, you start painting this picture and being willing to do things that other people aren't willing to do. But as I interview all these people, I just notice that pattern over and over and over again, right? That everyone's path is different. Nobody's path is linear. Everyone has ups and downs along the way. And it doesn't just, go from, hey, this was a startup and then overnight we got funded with all this money. And, next thing I knew, we were running $100 million business and we don't really know where it happened. Those things don't really exist. Everyone's success, even if someone's success seems relatively overnight, it's 10 years in the making, 20 years in the making, right? And people only see the little bit on the outside. But I've also noticed the same thing is true when you're trying to find really good people, is that people will have these patterns in their lives of being able to make good decisions, of being honest and doing what they say they're going to do, of valuing hard work, of being the type of people that are going to get the job done, whatever the job is, regardless of how long it takes. And just noticing these patterns. And as I, kind of coach or teach or mentor people, I tell people all the time, like, patterns in life are like the cheat code. And the sooner you can recognize patterns and go adapt those into your life for your benefit, the better off you're going to be. And recognizing patterns in people is one of the most valuable skills that you can develop. That is, you notice what patterns people put in their life, and then you go start integrating those into yours. Like, you're just going to go places way faster.
When you start to realize that people, their success sometimes just comes from getting back up after failure. So, I kind of mentioned earlier, like, I feel like mentors come in different categories, right? Like, I take difficult people that I've had in my life that have been, tough, either colleagues or leaders or bosses that, it's just super hard for whatever reason. Your personality doesn't click with them. Your fundamental philosophies don't click with them. But either way, like I've tried to turn that around and be like, those are mentors to me too, because I'm going to learn something in this situation, even if it's difficult. And I guess
learn what not to do sometimes.
Yeah. And sometimes for me, like, I would just say one of my biggest motivators is I love it when somebody tells me I can't do something, right? Like, I'll go to the depths of the world to prove that wrong. So even though that person's been a difficult person in my life, maybe gave me some, very harsh criticism, maybe not in a great way, but I still can take that, turn it around, use it as fuel to fuel my next step, right?
Yep.
Like, yeah, okay, maybe you don't
And
think
difficult experiences, sometimes those destroy people. Other times they give you determination, right? Like, motivation is going to come and go, but like, you can take those hard things. You can take someone telling you can't. Like, some people get devastated by stuff like that. And then others of us, it's like, oh, that's exactly what I needed. Like, that's my favorite thing in the world.
Sometimes it almost becomes addictive because, you burn out, you get tired. Sometimes you're just like, where's the next, step? Where's the next fuel in the tank? And sometimes you're just like, I'm just going to take these little pieces and I'm going to make fuel out of that negativity.
Yeah.
Right.
So, well, I was listening to an interview with Tom Brady, and he was like, I would get myself so psyched. I was like, I almost had to become psychotic about it, right? where I would go find a clip. I go take something that someone said, newspaper article, some radio interview. So it's like, what did he say?
Yeah.
What did he do? This guy said this. This guy disrespected me. This guy disrespected my team. Okay. All right. That's exactly what I needed. Right. He's like, and that would like fuel me to like get to where we needed to go. He's like, and that is what pushed me to go study so hard, to go prepare so hard, to go make sure that I knew everything about that team. I knew that team better than they knew themselves before we went to go play them. I knew the way they moved their hips, the way they opened. I could tell if they were blitzing based on the way the guy moved his head, based on the way he moved his feet, the way he liked to stand. Like I knew his own body movements better than he did, and I could tell exactly what he was doing. Right? Like, and it's just like
sometimes you just have to sometimes fabricate the motivation.
Yeah.
At times when the going's tough, like, where am I getting this, right? Yep. Sometimes you have to fabricate it in different ways. And I'm not saying that, some of those people really thought that I would fail, but I took that in a way that, motivated me to push harder.
Yeah, fueled you. So, no, I love it. And one of the things I know about you, Ryan, is I love, and I think that we share this commonality, is attention to detail, right? Like, I think that is something that gets often overlooked in the world, and that your success in almost everything that I'm aware of will most frequently come down to your attention to detail. If you focus on what are seemingly the little things, you will quickly realize that those things are actually the big things.
Yeah, I mean, we've built some, and I've been part of some, awesome projects, and I'm not the sole guy, on any of these things. I'm not trying to take any credit. Like, any masterful machine was my sole idea. Like, we had a team of brilliant people, working, even before my own business, right? They're always just playing a role, right? But understanding what your role is and how you can participate in that and do that to the best of your ability. Like, sometimes that's the recipe to success, right? Just know the role, do the best you can at it, it'll come out.
Do your job and do it really, really, really well.
But when you have a bunch of people doing your job really, really well, I mean, you know the analogies to football, like, one guy can miss his responsibility and it turns into, a touchdown for the other team. So again, going back to, laying out and defining those roles, knowing the devil's in the details, and, mapping those details out, right, is important.
No, I love it. Last question I had for you. So you guys ultimately scaled your business to the point where someone wanted to come in and acquire you. Talk to us about that process a little bit. What did that look like? And maybe one major lesson that you learned in going through that process.
Yeah. So we didn't necessarily seek that out. We knew that as a system integrator, as a machine designer, we were in many verticals. I mean, we were doing anybody that needed anything. Didn't matter whether it's medical device. Yep, we can do that. We'll figure it out. If it was in aerospace, never done it before, but yep, we can do that. We'll figure it out. So we were in a lot of different things. And when you always have a science project, it's really hard to always maintain that profitability, because sometimes you just get into some difficult situations that end up costing extra money. So the golden egg, if you will, for a system integrator is to come up with a machine or a process that you've automated that you actually can repeat build for others.
Yeah.
And that takes some extra effort. You got to have either the intellectual property, so you have to invest it in maybe a key patent for yourself. You have to, make sure that patent's not out there held by somebody else. You have to negotiate with the customer that you're doing it for, that they're going to be willing to share that intellectual property with you. So we kind of, figured that out, and we got some situations where we got 50-50 rights to what we designed. And it came out that we, had a couple of different machines that were replicatable. And in order to replicate that, that's when we kind of said, well, we need some fuel to actually make this happen, because we don't have the capital to do this. So we didn't necessarily know how that was going to come about. We were pretty naive to the process of how do you seek capital. So, you kind of learn that, well, there's some strategic buyouts. Maybe somebody that's in the same industry doing something similar might want to expand on their stuff. So there's a strategic opportunity. You got your venture capital, right? You got your private equity. So we hired basically a banker to kind of paint our story and to paint the opportunity that we thought we had. And well, came back was, man, it was shocking. We're thinking we're just a couple guys, in Nampa, Idaho, just kind of trying to do our thing. And well, there's quite a few people that actually thought our baby looked pretty, right? And so,
Yeah.
man, we got like 60 interested opportunities when we first sent out that blast.
Wow.
And you're like, man, I was just hoping for a little bit of money, right? And all of a sudden you got everything ranging from complete buyout to investing some serious money. And you're like, whoa, this is almost overwhelming. So we went through that process for about 8 or 9 months, kind of whittled it down to, top 5 best opportunities. And I'll just say, that was 2020. So, you're in the midst of COVID. I will just say that was one of the most difficult times with our business. It became pretty apparent to me that, all of our hard work, all the stuff that we'd built and the employees we'd accumulated and put into the right seats on the bus could be gone in an instant with somebody's swipe of the pen of saying you're essential or not essential.
Yeah.
And the circumstances of all that was very difficult. And so I kind of come out of that with a different mindset of thinking I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I'm like, how do I not lose all this hard work? And so when these interested parties started coming to the table, I had a different mindset. Like, maybe a bird in the hand's worth 2 in the bush here. And maybe I kind of check out of this a little bit. And so we went through a few different, kind of got down to our top 2. And ultimately made a decision to sell the business to a private equity. And then the 2 of us partners that were still with us, we'd lost one along the way to another startup, some stuff there. But the 2 of us decided that we would kind of step back. We'd be on a board of directors. We were held on a retainer, but pretty much turned over control of the business. And mostly that was, I could just see how fragile retaining that business might actually be.
Yeah.
So, took what I could while I could.
Well, your story is amazing, and just looking at it from time in your youth to all the way through, and you sharing that point about being in a nice neighborhood or stopping and talking to people and asking them like, okay, how did you get to where you are, and feeling overwhelmed at times, and rocking a newborn baby and trying to do homework late at night and cleaning houses and, your wife and everything that you guys did together along the way. And you look back and it's like, almost like you look up like, okay, how did I get here?
Yeah.
And really, I think it's so much of what we just talked about earlier, where it's like, it's just consistency, right? Like if you can show up and if you can work hard, if you can be honest, if you can treat people right, and work on your craft, whatever that is, work on developing, work on becoming better at that. And your craft may for a time, in your case, be being an engineer, and then it's being a business owner and, developing what that looks like. If you're willing to just do that day in, day out for years and decades, and if you can go do that longer than other people can go do, like you're going to make it and you're going to get there.
Yeah, I think you brought up, Tom Brady. I love his Hall of Fame speech, right? He's like, I'm not special, right? We just show up and be consistent and do the things that other people aren't willing to do. And it's like, even some of the projects that were very successful, we had a very good reputation of taking on very difficult things that most people traditionally wouldn't do with a robot, that we did try and were successful at. But, people are like, oh, you guys are so fantastic. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's just, I just did what I said I was going to do. And it's surprising when you're out and you see the number of systems that don't work or the number of projects that have failed. And it's like, I didn't feel like we were doing necessarily anything special. We were just following through with what we said we would do and not quitting. Right? When it got tough and we didn't have a way, and the way that we had wasn't going to work, we didn't quit and call the customer and say, well, sorry, this is going to be a loss. Like, we just stuck with it. And so when everybody else around you is okay with mediocrity and you're just a step above that, like, I didn't ever feel like we were that special. It was just, we were just willing to do just a little bit more than everybody else.
No, love it. Well, Ryan, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your story with us. If people want to contact you, if someone listening to the podcast would love to connect with you, get mentored from you, touch base with you somehow, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Probably email.
Okay. we'll include your email and the link with this, and a link to your social media as well if you want to reach out and get in touch with you. But your story is amazing, compelling. So hopefully everyone listening today can draw inspiration from Ryan's story all along the way of being a kid from small town in Idaho to growing a highly successful technology and robotics business. And so I think that, all along the way, there's a lot that everyone can gain from that. So I appreciate you being here and sharing your story with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
It's been fun.
absolutely.